Hi there, I'm Adam Riley from WGBH. It is 8 weeks until Boston's preliminary mayoral election, which is going to winnow the field of candidates from 12 to 2. And this is the first in a series of weekly webcasts that we're going to be doing on the state of the Boston mayor's race. I'm joined by two former and current colleagues here today, David Bernstein and Peter Kadzis. I suppose we should mention your Boston Magazine affiliation, right?
That's right.
Just to get that out
contributing
there.
editor as well as a contributor here at WGBH.
Right. Okay. Let's start quickly and talk about the tiering of the mayor's race that you guys did yesterday on Greater Boston and compare it to the ranking of this new insiders poll that you have coming out on Boston Magazine. You and Peter saw the race yesterday a little bit differently than the people you polled for Boston Magazine. Can you talk about the discrepancies and maybe whether they've changed your mind?
Well, I think that what I can tell you about the insiders poll, which will be posted at the Boston Magazine site soon, is that it had a neck and neck. It showed a neck and neck race between Marty Walsh, the state representative, and John Conley, the city councilor from West Roxbury. Then a gap, and then very closely matched, Dan Conley, the district attorney, and Rob Consalvo, who has sort of moved up in these insiders' estimation. And then another gap to get down to Felix Arroyo, Charlotte Golo-Ritchie, Mike Ross, and then the other candidates.
And you and Peter yesterday had Walsh, Conley, and Connolly in your top three in no particular order, and then Consalvo a tier lower, correct?
Right, but I think you're being too much of an expert here. Those three, we said, were the guys to beat, that the other four were running against them. And I think what David's expert poll does is perfectly consistent. It's a very fluid race, and Consalvo, who is just a bundle of energy, both in terms of ideas and you know.
It's amazing. He's the most energetic in the field as far as I'm concerned.
He's moving up, and perhaps Conley, D.A. Conley, despite his media buy, might be slipping down a little. It's very fluid.
We should actually just step back a moment because some of the people who are watching will not have paid attention to the race that we had. Why are Marty Walsh and John Connolly sort of the guys to beat, and perhaps Dan Conley, although I guess that's...
Well, some of that comes from the little bits of polling that we've seen, but also from people's observation. That John Conley, he got that early start when he was taking on Tom Menino before Tom Menino announced that he wasn't going to be running. And he used that time to start his organization, to also start getting identified in people's minds as a major political figure in the city, and also to identify him as sort of the school reform guy.
I'll take Marty Walsh.
Yeah.
Walsh, as a rule, State House candidates do not run well in races for Boston. Marty Walsh is an exception. And I think one of the reasons is because he's very organizationally minded. He worked hard for Elizabeth Warren. A lot of Elizabeth Warren's supporters are with him. They are nothing if not on the ground, Obama-type political mechanics. Also, for a blue-collar guy, he, like Tom Menino, is naturally liberal on some issues, especially gay marriage. And that's helped him. So that's why those two guys...
And a ton of union support.
A lot of union support for Marty Walsh. And both of them have raised a lot of money that they will be able to spend to keep bolstering their numbers and so on. And also they both have allies. You know, Marty Walsh has the labor unions who will be important volunteers, but also will be spending money presumably on his behalf. And John Conley is sort of the school reformer. There's a whole bunch of money and interest in helping him.
Talking about money, we should mention that the fundraising totals just came in for the last month. It was a great month for Marty Walsh in particular, who raised about $250,000. On the other hand, it seems to me a pretty bad month for Felix Arroyo, the Boston City Councilor, who'd also been hoping to tap into support, financial and organizational, from organized labor. He only raised about $26,000. How worrisome are those numbers for Felix Arroyo?
Well, they don't do him any good among insiders, because it's like the insiders look at how much money can you raise. Among the money guys, he could argue, I think with some justification, that he has a lot of supporters around the city. What's interesting, and I haven't reviewed the latest numbers yet, but a couple of days ago, Arroyo's money may not be as much as everyone, but only Consalvo has givers spread more widely around the city. So he may not have as much, but it's widespread.
There's also a sense that there are certain candidates who would do better to have a lot of money to spend, and other candidates who maybe need a certain amount but don't necessarily need to be as competitive. You know, Felix Arroyo has pretty solid name recognition, likability. You know, the polls tend to show. For him, it's a matter of converting those people into believing him as mayor. You know, at his age or whatever, however they might think of him. Not so much get to know him. And so the money, he does, however, need a certain amount of money. And you know, like Peter said, if the insiders think that he's not viable because it's something they can sort of look at, then they might start peeling off to other candidates.
One of the candidates who was in your bottom tier when you guys did your sort of collective rankings yesterday, Bill Walczak, made a big splash by coming out strongly against a casino in Boston. He's the only candidate to stake out that aggressive and anti-casino stance. We know that just under half of Boston voters have said they don't want a casino in the city. Any chance that this move on his part could elevate his status in the race?
If he becomes a more of a one-issue candidate, vote no for casino, you know, vote no in casinos, vote Walczak. That's probably his ticket to move up.
There's no question it helps him. I mean, you know, for someone who's not very well known to suddenly have an article about you on the front page of the Globe,
yeah.
Very helpful. And what I'm told from inside the campaign is that they start getting contributions in as a direct result of that, some of which will show up in the July financial reports, but a lot of which came too late.
Free advice for Bill. You don't have to pay for this. Vote no on casinos. Vote for Walczak.
One last question, just really briefly, because we're running out of time here. We got a question on Twitter from a man named Larry Donnelly who wanted to know, is there going to be one candidate who emerges as the quote-unquote New Boston candidate? So I guess I'm wondering what you two think about that, and also whether the phrase New Boston even really has any meaning anymore, or is maybe all of Boston New Boston?
I think that there's a very good chance that there will in the final. The bigger question is whether someone can consolidate those different parts of New Boston in the primary to enough of a degree to get to the numbers they need to get into that final. For instance, Mike Ross
Yes.
is a terrific sort of New Boston candidate. I actually had a few people in this insiders poll who said, you know, frankly, he's coming across as the guy who would be the best mayor. I'm just not sure that he can get it through the prelim.
I wondered what you were going to say. To me, New Boston equals Mike Ross.
Why? Why is that?
But no, you know, he's young, he's smart, he's intellectually aggressive. He has new ideas. I mean, he's not afraid to say that he should run to 3 a.m., which still remarkably shocks people. But no one neighborhood, if you will, or no one constituency can be elected mayor citywide. But I would say Mike Ross equals New Boston, but that in itself won't do it.
Let's wrap up here for this week. We will be back again next week when there are 7 weeks to go until the election. Peter Kadzis, David Bernstein, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
You guys got to dress up next time.